All right, moving on to our next panel discussion, and that is about solar panels and home battery storage and electric vehicles, all three combined. I thought Michael came up with a very clever title for the presentation, ELPCO Solar Panel Discussion. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael Alosi, who's ELPCO's at-large member, recently joined our board, and has put together this excellent panel and a bunch of questions. We are running a little bit behind time, Michael, so if you could speed things along, your presenters could move through. We'll just try to cover as many topics as we can, but do appreciate everything you've done.
Great. So I'll introduce the panelists real quick. So we have Kate Bowman, if you want to give a wave there, from Utah Clean Energy, and she's a renewable energy program manager there. And then we have Scott Jones, who's an ELPCO resident, and he does technical solar sales at Creative Energies. And then Alejandro Puy, is that the right way to say it? I guess I should have asked you that before. He's an SLC resident with rooftop solar and a Tesla Powerwall. We're really excited to hear his experience. So let's dive right into the questions. And I apologize in advance. I gave you questions, but I will might abbreviate them a little so we can hustle along. So the first question is for Kate. So this one, what are I know that the rates have, the rebates have changed, the tax credits and incentives have changed over time. So what are the current federal and state rebates, tax incentives, and then what are the Rocky Mountain Power or other rebates? And when are those going to change next?
That's a great question. Thanks for having us. It's I find that it's more common than it ever has been, but it's still, folks have so many questions about it, especially when you add in battery storage. So I'm excited to hear more about that from Alejandro too. So there's a federal and a state tax credit for solar. The federal tax credit is currently 26% of the cost of the installation, and the Utah state tax credit is $1,200 this year. And both the federal and the state tax credits are stepping down over time. So in order to get those amounts, you do have to install by the end of 2021, and they both step down in 2022 and past that. And so I can actually send a link in the chat that shows the full step down of the tax incentives. But if it's something you've been thinking about, it's a really great time to do it now while the tax credits are a little bit higher. There used to be a utility incentive for solar about 5 years ago, but there isn't one any longer. And so those two tax credits are going to be the main thing to help you bring the upfront cost of installing down.
But you did say there's one for a battery.
Yeah, that's right. There's also a new not tax credit, but a new incentive from Rocky Mountain Power specifically for battery storage. And I can send a link to that as well. It's a little more complicated in terms of figuring out the pricing. There's an upfront incentive when you buy a battery and you enroll it in the program. And then there's an ongoing incentive each year that you participate in the program. And that one's a little different because it does actually allow Rocky Mountain Power to access and control your battery. And so the advantage is that they can use your battery during times when there's strain on the grid or there's high demand for electricity, and they can take advantage of all of these, networks of home batteries to help produce energy and or use energy that's been stored by the batteries and keep costs low where they might otherwise have to purchase power at high costs. But they do have access to your battery, and so if you want it for backup and you want to know that it's fully charged in the event of an emergency, that might be something you want to think about. And Scott might have some more thoughts on that. It's still new. It's currently only available for one manufacturer. You can't use it on the Tesla Powerwall, for example. So it is a little more complicated to figure out, but it is available, and could be a pretty sizable amount if it works out for you.
So that's a perfect segue into net metering, because we're talking about power flows going in and out, right? So could you explain the changes to the net metering rates, and also how you might have to just give a brief bit on how net metering works.
Yeah, sure. So what net metering is net metering is the policy through which you connect your solar panels to the grid, and then you receive credit for any energy that you produce that you send back out to the grid. So when you have solar panels on your roof, they're generating energy whenever it's sunny outside. And if you're home and you're using electricity at your home or your business, then that electricity goes to power whatever you're doing in your house. If you're not home, or if you're generating more electricity than you're using, that power goes straight out to the grid and it goes to power, your next neighbor. And so what net metering is it's the policy through which Rocky Mountain Power gives you a credit for that energy sent to the grid. And so we actually no longer have true net metering in Utah. Net metering is a 1-for-1 exchange. So you send out 1 kilowatt hour, you get 1 kilowatt hour credit back. And last year, in November last year, we changed, Rocky Mountain Power changed to a new policy that's called the Solar Export Credit. It's similar in some ways in that it gives you a credit when you export electricity to the grid, but that credit is now valued at a dollar amount rather than just a kilowatt hour that you can use whenever you want. And it also has a set value, which is about 5.5 to 6 cents, depending on the season. So when you export energy to the grid, you're getting a lower amount than you used to through net metering. But when you use energy on site, you're still avoiding purchasing energy from Rocky Mountain Power at the same retail price. And so when you go to figure out your savings, you do have to look at how much energy am I going to use on site, because when you produce solar and use it on site, you can avoid purchasing power from Rocky Mountain Power. And the retail rate for energy for a residential customer can be between like 9 and 12 cents. So there's a much higher value when you generate that and use it on site than when you export it and you only get 6 cents back. So that's something to, that a solar installer can help you look at your energy usage and work through what that might look like and what your savings could be. But that's what we've got in place currently.
Cool. So from there, I think we should jump to you, Scott, and talk. A lot of what Kate just said makes me wonder, how big should my solar system be? And how do people know how to size? I know I struggled with this when I was purchasing solar. Do I upsize? Do I go smaller? How do you know?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So really, upsize, downsize, my philosophy is just right size. You want to right size the system. You don't want to go overboard. You certainly don't want to go underboard. Every system is going to be custom built for the specific home, and everybody's roofs are different. Some folks have shade, some folks face south, some folks are east and west. So we want to take advantage of the more viable roof spaces first. We're talking about a rooftop mounted system. And see where we can find the right value. That might mean that the system offsets half of your energy profile, and it could mean that it offsets 100% and makes you net energy zero. With these policy changes that Kate did a super good job succinctly and accurately describing, if somebody's goal, if their primary motivation for going solar is to eliminate their power bill, under this new export credit rate that Rocky Mountain Power has now enacted, you might need to generate or build a system that offsets 130% of your needs to zero out the bill. You're still going to have an $8 a month minimum fee just for the benefit of being connected to the grid. But a system that large probably isn't the best financial investment. So as you get up above about 50% offset, you start to hit kind of the point of diminishing returns, where more of your solar energy is being pushed back to the grid and devalued, or you're being compensated at a lower rate. So, it's a case-by-case study. It really depends on the homeowner's goals, but usually around an 80% offset is kind of the sweet spot.
Okay. What if I'm planning to buy an EV? I mean, I think we're all going to be driving EVs sooner or later here. What if I'm going to add a hot tub, or I'm thinking I'm going to electrify my boiler?
Yeah, great question. So An electric vehicle on average, the typical homeowner that drives a vehicle might drive around 10,000 miles per year. If you're charging that electric vehicle exclusively at your residence, that has the potential to increase your energy load by about 3,500 kilowatt hours. So that's similar to adding a brand new hot tub or an air conditioning unit. They're all kind of around the same consumption range, right around 3,000 kilowatt hours or so. So that would equate to another 5 or 6 solar panels on the roof, in a well-sited, shade-free, good southern orientation.
Hey, sorry, I had a intruder. Only 5.
Right sizing the system and looking at those, the addition of an EV, of a hot tub, any of those loads, a reputable contractor should be able to help provide some guidance and give you the right size.
So how much should I expect to pay for this system? I mean, I know there's no average, but is there a certain amount per square footage of my house, or is there some kind of rule of thumb?
Yeah. So the typical homeowner that we're seeing, and we do a lot of residential solar here in this area, this neighborhood, is right around 5 to 6 kW, certainly larger than that and some smaller, but most probably come in right around 6 kW. And a good competitive price right now, we usually price systems as a cost per watt, would be under $3 a watt. So that would equate to, if you look at a 6 kW system, to give you an idea of a physical size, that's probably 16 to 18 solar panels. Mm-hmm. And a good competitive price would be around $18,000 or lower. If you factor in the federal and state tax credits, your net out of pocket is about 12 grand. If you're looking at about a 5 kW system, you're talking about 14, 15 panels, and your net out of pocket should be right around 10 grand.
Now, I did want to ask about financing. You sent me some literature on something that looked pretty interesting. I know on my system, I just kind of lucked into a cool setup where I was doing a refi at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have to pay any money out of pocket. So I just added it onto the back end of my mortgage. And I mean, my mortgage still went down, even adding solar because of the refi. Do you have any tips on financing programs like that, or the one you suggested?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So this is an area where you want to tread cautiously because there's a lot of gotchas, and I've got to say, the underbelly of this high growth industry has been that there's been a lot of guys out there in business of selling almost predatory loans. So you want to be careful. And it sounds to me like you took advantage of a home equity line of credit or a refinance, something like that, and that's an excellent way to do it. A lot of the clients we work with, if you just reach out to your own particular personal lending institution, credit union, bank, great rates right now. And that's a really good way to do it that would avoid any of these upfront dealer fees that typically get rolled into some of these loans if the solar contractor is trying to sell you their financing product. And also no prepayment penalties is something to look out for. So yeah, a home equity line of credit or a mortgage refi where you can roll in the cost of a renewable or even green energy improvements would be a great way to go. At Creative Energies, we've never offered in-house financing. It just feels yucky, and I want to be able to sleep at night. So we do have a third-party lending institution that we feel really good about. They're a fellow B Corporation, certified B Corporation, and they specialize in green energy loans, and that's the Clean Energy Credit Union. And looks like we just put a link up here to the Clean Energy Credit Union for those folks that might be interested in it. But whatever price the solar contractor comes and says, hey, here's what we're proposing the cost of the system is. If you go through the Clean Energy Credit Union, that cost remains the same. There's no origination fees. So that's a beautiful thing. And then you can feel good about that money coming from an organization that's investing their capital assets and good things that are good for the earth, essentially.
Now, batteries. How much more does that cost? How many people are getting batteries? And what's the benefits, I guess?
Yeah, so tons of people are interested in batteries. I mean, the weak link in any renewable is the intermittency of the generation, right? And the inability to be able to store that energy. So that's where batteries really kind of fit that niche and round out the whole renewable energy so that it's available around the clock. Batteries are quite cost prohibitive right now. I'd say probably 75% or more people that are looking into solar right now are inquiring about batteries, and probably a quarter of those, 30% or so, are actually installing battery storage system with or without solar. The real inherent value of an energy storage system or a battery system is an emergency preparedness. So it's kind of this qualitative, what is the value to you of having peace of mind knowing that if we have an earthquake or another inland hurricane windstorm that knocks out power to the neighborhood, you being able to island and have solar on your roof and be your self-generating, self-perpetuating power plant that keeps the lights on. Really, that's where the value lies.
But not time of use pricing?
There is no time of use pricing in Utah with solar. There's some experimental kind of riders that you can enroll in for time of use pricing. But if you have solar on your roof, they're mutually exclusive. So 99% or more folks don't have time of use pricing here in Utah. So there's really no rate arbitrage programming that the battery would apply. The battery would help offset the utility cost. So if time of use ever does come to Utah, and I strongly believe it's coming probably in the next 3 to 5 years, battery systems can certainly help do some of that cost shifting to avoid pulling energy from the grid during those peak demand hours where rates are really expensive. But even at that, we've looked at market rates in Hawaii, California, where rates are 35, 40 cents a kilowatt hour. I don't think we're ever going to see rates that high. And adding battery storage to even markets with that high of a time of use rate, by the time the battery finishes its life cycle, it might have paid for itself. So that's again why I go back to saying, really all the inherent value of a battery storage system is emergency preparedness or increasing your self-consumption, just knowing that you can feel good about consuming more of your solar energy on your own autonomous system.
Okay, thanks. So Alejandro, I want to hear about a battery in action and how you're liking it. If you can just kind of give us a little intro on how your system is set up with the solar and the battery.
I mean, the system is very seamless, right? There is nothing, even when the power goes out, and it happened a couple of times in very brief periods here since I had the battery, you don't realize that the power is out at all, at least with the system I have, because it's moving the electricity through the battery all the time. So if the power goes out, it just keeps on coming from the battery. So it's very seamless that way. So there is less, those like little quick off and on that sometimes happens when there's a storm, which I love not to have to deal with them. So there is that is one of the great benefits, and like Scott said, is one of the it really is. There's not a price to me to have the peace of mind that I will have electricity in case of an emergency. I guess most of us experience a very traumatic 2020 for multiple reasons, but I actually had neighbors this last year that they came to charge some batteries when they were out of power. Some house batteries, some to charge their phones and whatnot. To me, I'm actually very happy. I only bought one because of, like said before, they're very pricey. My house could use two. So if I had if there was no power in the grid, I could not use the air conditioning, which I'm totally fine. If there's a disaster there, I'm fine not having air conditioning. I think that everybody will agree with us. But if I had two batteries, I could use the microwave, I guess, and the air conditioning. But but so far I'm actually very happy with it. It's very seamless. It's very pretty. I mean, my battery at least. I mean, they're all the ones. They're all making very pretty batteries, I guess. So it's not an eyesore. There is nothing very bulky outside your house. It doesn't feel like an air conditioning unit or anything like that. So it just sits on the wall, and it has a light on the side, very Tesla-like, very fancy looking. But yeah, I'm very happy with it.
Okay. Now, how long does it last? You said your house could use 2 batteries. So is that half the day? And then if you run a reduced load and kind of milk a few days out of it, or?
Well, it depends on how much you use, right? How much electricity you're using, right? How big is your system? And, you know, are you cooking a brisket in your microwave 45 minutes, which I don't know who will do that. But right, like that, those are the things that, you know, make a difference on how long your battery will last. But in my case, my battery lasts all night, and I'm usually out of power by 8 in the morning. And by 8 in the morning, it's already bright and it's sort of charging already. So, you know, I almost have like a continuous amount of energy. Basically, I'm self-powered, so I don't even use the you know, the Rocky Mountain power at all. Almost. Obviously, if there's an overcast day, right, like if it's very cloudy, those things do make a difference. And I also wanted to make sure that, and I mentioned this, someone mentioned this, but the storm watch system, some of these batteries have it, mine does. When they connect, they are connected to the internet. So if there is a storm watch coming, which happened not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, the battery changes itself, and it basically makes sure that it's totally charged 100% by the time that the storm is here, to make sure that you have, you know, 100% charged battery, and is always charging it basically until you need the electricity from the battery. So I thought that was a great feature. It gives you, again, a peace of mind in case of an emergency.
Cool. So is there anything you do differently making your system now, or is there anything else, you know, that you didn't expect to happen with the solar panels? Like I don't, my upstairs of my house gets really hot. I haven't tested in the summer yet, but I'm hoping that it's going to intercept some heat to keep it a little cooler. You know, I'm just wondering if you've experienced any kind of weird externalities like that.
No, I mean, I have this is a 120-year-old home, so I had a lot of concerns about putting these heavy objects on my roof without, you know, doing some sort of research about is the roof is going to collapse on top of me one day. And you know, the people that came and installed it, they did a quick look, and they were like very experienced about this. You know, the concerns I had were basically solved ahead of installation, and since then I have not had any issues really.
So and then Kate and Scott, what's next? You know, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, I know that there's a push to get off greenhouse gases. So having electric boilers, that's one thing I feel like has not been addressed much. Is there anything else that you know of that we haven't talked about?
You know, I think some things that I'm really excited about that are becoming more common in other, you know, utility areas are new options for your appliances that are electric and that are more efficient than, you know, what you would traditionally have, and also that are can be connected to the grid in a way that you can actually use them kind of like a smart appliance. You know, so for example, I mean, one small example of this is there's currently an energy efficiency incentive available through Rocky Mountain Power if you have air conditioning, where they put a small device on your air conditioner. It's called the Cool Keeper program. And during times when everybody's air conditioning is just cranking and it's hot out, they can actually go through and cycle them. And the idea is to turn it off for like a minute at a time, so you don't notice it. But they can avoid having everybody's air conditioning going at the exact same time. And you know, that's good because it helps keep the cost down. But also you look at situations like in California or Texas where they had outages because there was just so much demand and the grid couldn't keep up. And I think that's going to get more and more important to have these, you know, a smart, flexible grid. so that we don't end up in these situations where the grid's not flexible enough to meet our needs and you have problems with that. So the Cool Keeper program, that's something you can do right now, but I think if you're looking at replacing any major appliance, it's a really good time to look at what options are out there. Heat pumps used to be they used to not work very well in cold climates, but there's now a cold climate, heat pump that you can use to heat your home in the winter. And the cool thing is you can also use it to cool your home in the summer. So if you don't have air conditioning, then you can do both. And it's way more efficient than other types of heating, especially if you have electric resistance heating. That's not super common here. But if you have electric resistance heating and you swap it out for a heat pump, you might end up saving money, just outright because of the cheaper costs. So that's one thing to look at. And some utilities are starting to look at a smart electric water heater. So the idea there is that you want hot water when you want hot water. And if everybody comes home and uses their water at the same time, that creates spikes on the grid. But if you have a really well insulated water heater, then you can actually set it up to have your water superheated in the middle of the day when, more of us have solar, there's more solar on the grid and energy's free and abundant. And you can superheat that water heater. And then that way, when you come home, you don't need to use energy to keep it hot. It's already hot from the middle of the day. And so we can kind of smooth out energy usage on the grid. So I think there's lots of cool things, that are coming in the next few years. And if you are replacing a major appliance, it's super, annoying to have to do that. But also, always, I think before kind of replacing it with what you had before, it's worth thinking about or, asking if there's something more efficient or, different that you could be looking into.
Okay. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I would fully echo everything that Kate just said there. Some of these smart home and smart energy management devices like the electric water heater, that's a great way to mitigate export credits of solar and prevent Rocky Mountain Power from taking their slice of the pie, if you will. So rather than exporting, you can certainly divert some of that surplus solar into that hot water heater, store it rather than using gas. So a lot of these, smart home software management stuff, I think is really exciting. Some of the other things I'm really looking forward to is perhaps a carbon tax. The Department of Environmental Quality, we're hoping, will be tasked to create a value, to a carbon tax value, essentially. And one of the lesser known things about renewable energy systems is they generate renewable energy credits, and perhaps if those are ever worth money on the open market, that could be a good incentive to help fund your own personal renewable energy system on your home. So that's something to kind of stay tuned into. Another thing that really excites me is this interplay with electric vehicles, which are becoming more and more ubiquitous, and manufacturers starting to open up that stored energy technology to become bidirectional. And that concept is known as vehicle to grid or vehicle to home, V2G for short, or V2H, where essentially your battery storage system, like a Tesla Powerwall, is your vehicle. It's just on wheels. If you can dock that car to your house, charge it with solar, use it to charge your home during a grid failure, or just to reduce strain on the grid, I think that's the next huge evolution that we'll see coming.
I didn't realize you could do that, or you're saying that can't happen yet.
Not yet, not in the States, but it's Nissan is doing it in both Australia and Japan. They have V2G, V2H that they've released with their architecture. So, we've seen a reverse teardown of a Tesla automobile, and they're set up they're pretty brilliant the way that they did it. They've set up the battery system in 3 phases. So you could use a fleet of Teslas essentially to run a 3-phase industry building, wow. Commercial enterprise, or it's triple redundant for a single phase grid. So the architecture and the design is there. It's just a matter of the manufacturers releasing that energy and allowing it to go the other direction to power homes. It's just probably just a firmware release, really.
So I know we're about out of time. quick thing, Kate, I know you wanted to give a plug on energy efficiency improvements. You kind of touched on it, but do I do the energy efficiency improvements before my solar, after?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And we talked about it a little bit, but I always like to make sure we mention when talking about solar that, if you haven't done everything you can to improve efficiency first, then you're wasting money when you install solar to provide energy that you could have just avoided. And so changing out your furnace filter, for example, is not as exciting as installing solar, but things like that can have, a big impact when you add them up. If you haven't replaced all the lights in your home with LEDs, there's huge energy savings potential there. And there are incentives available from Rocky Mountain Power for buying like an Energy Star appliance, for a smart thermostat if you don't have a smart thermostat already. And so definitely don't neglect the energy efficiency stuff that you can be doing around the house too.
All right, well, thank you. I thought that was great. There were a lot of great answers to questions in there. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? Feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute. We really appreciate you taking the time to educate us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, Michael, Scott, Kate, and Alejandro. What a great discussion. Last month, we learned we're all basically living in homes worth a pile of money from our real estate panel. This month, we learned that we're living in the electron age. And the idea that your Tesla could power your home or your business and not the other way around is pretty cool. So thank you, really cool. I apologize that the chat is not able to be copied. It's a leftover security measure from when we had things a little bit more locked down. I will get that chat up and kind of isolate all the solar panel responses and links and put that up on our Facebook page and our next ELPCO newsletter so everyone can get it. You can also screen capture it if you want to. I apologize, we're talking about the 23rd century and we can't copy paste on our own computer, but that's all right. We'll figure it out.